Hi, welcome back. This is part two of a conversation that we are having with Monica Lynne, AASECT sex therapist, who's back for a second time because she has so much wisdom for women of all ages. And this episode, we are getting deeper into our conversation around sexual vibrancy and sensuality throughout the decades. And we're picking up where we left off, which is the 30s, where career and or motherhood really takes a bite out of energy and libido and connection. But if you missed part one, we really recommend and hope you go back and start there because Monica shares so much wisdom about our sexuality and just our emerging identities in our 20s. So whether that's you or someone you love, she offers great insight. And you'll want to check that out and then make sure you come right back here for the rest because it gets really juicy when we get to the 40s and 50s. Enjoy.
30s and 40s, I think, are so busy. Like it's just so busy for, a couple decades. And so one of the things I tell people is take turns planning a date night.
Mm.
So somebody has January, March, May, somebody has February, like going through that and saying, like, looking at your schedules, extending the invite to your partner, making sure it works for their schedule, planning the date, planning the childcare if you have children, like planning all of it and making something fun and creative is a great way to say every month we have something that we're looking forward to that brings us to connection. And then every week we are doing a like meeting, a check-in meeting with each other.
Mm.
There's tons of fun ways to do that. I have lots of ideas, but like having a way to check in with each other every week for at least 30 to 60 minutes of quality time so that you are able to have that consistent connection. Those are things that can be, really helpful. And then in your 40s too, like your libido may start to go up if your kids are getting older and you're not touched out because now they're in their rooms with their headphones on and they don't really want anything to do with you. So then you might be, might be at a stage where your libido is actually going up, or you might be getting divorced in your 40s. And so now your libido is really up because there's new relationship energy with somebody else, or you've had, a lot of times for people that are getting divorced, they haven't had good sexual connection at the end of their marriage. So they might be like, wow, I'm totally renewed and missing this. And so, libido may change in your 40s as well. And there's like such a need for this renewed sense of self, I think, at this time, because whether it's that you're married and your kids are older, or you are at a different point in your career and you didn't have kids, or whether you're divorced, this is the time to sort of check in with yourself again and say, like, what part of me got lost? Like if
Mm.
I was a mom, what part of me is no longer really being attended to or showing up? Or if I was a high-powered business person and I kind of am at a point now where I'm coasting a little bit more, like what have I stopped doing? What are the things that brought me joy that I'm not doing anymore? And how do I return to that so that I feel like a whole person again?
Mm, so good.
Love it. That really hit home for me, not just for me, but for so many people I've worked with and so many friends that I feel like the most vibrant sexual self. I've always felt like I'm, like I love it, but the most vibrant I ever felt and free and just excited about it was my 40s. And I think it
Mm,
was exactly that, which is just like, oh, there you are again,
yeah.
like and not even again, like there you are and like all the things that you've always been but you like haven't really attended to. And so I love that. It's just such a great way to go. I could look at this as like a loss, or I could look at it as a like a found thing, like this
Mhm.
is a really great way to focus right now. And I think my 40s was when I was realizing if I was like getting short with my kids or having,
Mm,
like a lot of emotions around things, it almost always, if I looked at myself, it was like I'm neglecting something really important. And it was either just intimacy or like being heard or just having time,
mhm,
and so that was just a great solution, was to focus on that part of my life and that part of my marriage.
mhm, mhm. Totally. Yeah. I think of also what I hear a lot with people is at this point is I mean, people just in general want to be desired, right? Like that is whether you're single, married, been married for 20 years, 30 years, 5 years, like being desired is part of what makes sensuality and sexuality so good. And so then when I hear people in my office say that, and they say, "Oh, I just want to be desired," or I want to be found sexy." My thought in my head, which I don't say out loud, is always like, then show up desirable,
Mm.
show up sexy. Like some people say it almost like it's this entitlement of, well, I'm married and my person should find me desirable and sexy, and they don't. And so I'm sort of mad and resentful at them. And so I'm not as happy. And it makes me question well, how about you start with looking at yourself and seeing how you show up? Because if you're talking curtly or being unkind to your partner, most people don't want to have sex with somebody who talks to them in a tone and is rude to them, and I have this from any gender, all types of couples, all the things that somebody shows up and they are just short or curt or rude or unkind or they belittle or, nobody wants to have sex with that. Hands down. Like nobody wants to have sex with you if you're showing up that way. And so if you're that person that's not checking in with yourself and saying, how do I talk to my partner? And yet I feel entitled to wanting to feel desired. That is in your control. So that's, one space I'd say, like, check that part of yourself. Or somebody else that might be like, I just want my partner to find me attractive and to like only fantasize about me and not watch porn or not masturbate to other people. And they are also the same person that's like, oh, I hate working out. I don't like eating healthy. I don't drink water. It's like, well, okay, but how do you expect your partner to find you desirable if they value health and you're on the couch eating potato chips, So there's some of this that's like, it's not about size, but it's about how do you take care of yourself in a way that your partner's like, I feel attracted to my partner because they're putting their health first. They just went for a walk or they came in flushed from the cold weather, but they went for a run, or they're, doing their yoga on a daily basis in front of the TV and they're so centered with themselves or whatever it is. It's like, if health is important to you, then show up healthy for your partner to find you desirable. Or being helpful. Some people are like, my partner doesn't do anything. And so I find myself resentful. They're sitting down watching TV and I'm the one that's up, cleaning up the kitchen or making dinner or whatever. It's like, if you want to be desirable, then help out. And then I have
Mm.
people for both sides, all sides of genders saying, this is kind of a funny one, is when I see them one-on-one, I'll say, do you find your partner attractive still? And they're like, honestly, no. I've heard them belch and fart for 10 years. They're uninhibited. They think it's great because they're comfortable with me, but it's gross. It's not
Mm.
attractive. It's not sexy. They have totally let that part go. And, and I'm like, that's a hard conversation. And I've had it with people. I've had to have that conversation with people in session about their belching, their farting, their lack of brushing their teeth, their stinky breath, their stinky butt, like all of these things that people are like, you're wanting to have somebody love and want to cherish your body and touch you and smell you and lick you and do all the things, and you're not practicing good hygiene. So let's start there.
What's so
Wow.
interesting is the thing that keeps running in through my mind is you're not valuing yourself. So how do you
Mhm.
expect to be
Right.
valued? Like that's
Mhm.
what when you were talking about the sexy part, I'm like, as you were saying this, it's like it makes me think of going back to your 20s, like a self-exploration. How do I feel sexy? Because if I don't feel sexy, how is somebody else going to find me sexy?
Right. Like if you don't want to have sex with you,
Right, exactly,
like,
exactly. Yes.
would you find that attractive? Like if you were
Right.
farting all the time, right? Like, so
I
yeah,
guess I
I
don't
think
want
that those are
to.
good.
I don't want it to feel like, and I know this isn't what you mean, but like um, sort of victim blaming, right? Like if my partner doesn't find it's my fault. That's not what you're saying or what I'm thinking. My point is when you feel sexy, other people find you sexy.
Right.
And so there is a place where you have control over this by
Mhm.
looking at what can I do to make myself feel better? Because if I
Mhm.
feel better,
Right.
I'm going to be attractive.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that, Lisa, because it isn't what I'm intending to say either, is that, it's totally in your control whether your partner finds you attractive or not. And it's not, like, it's totally
Right.
not in your control. But what are you doing that is upping your game as far as feeling attractive yourself? Like,
Right.
you could be somebody that's in a bigger body, but you're fit and you're strong. You could be
Yeah.
somebody who is taking care of themselves. And that's like, if you're doing everything that you can in your control to present yourself in a way that you feel good about yourself, you feel sexy,
Right.
confident, you feel clean, you feel happy, like vibrancy, that all of that is what's going to be attractive to somebody else. And if you're doing all those things and your partner's not attracted to you, well, that's when you got to reassess, like, are we still compatible? Because we
Yeah.
kind of have to reevaluate through the years, like, did we grow apart? Are we not, in a space where this is really salvageable anymore? Or are there things that we just haven't been talking about? Because that's the other thing, is that people just, if I move into the 50s here, like, I think of how people have gotten into sort of a default and they stop trying to grow. And
Mm.
some people are very personal growth minded and some people aren't. They're kind of like, well, I'm done. I'm a 50-year-old person. I don't need to do anything more. And it's like, wow, we grow until we die.
Yeah.
And so when I
Yeah.
look at, like, your 50s, I think of, like, for women that are going through menopause, and sometimes that's a huge, I mean, I know you've talked about that a lot on your show, and it's like that there's so many components to menopause that could be stacked against you, and make you
Mhm.
feel not sexy or make you uncomfortable or be, difficult. But then, like, what are you doing about that? Are you trying to be as proactively healthy, make as many healthy habit choices each day as you possibly can, getting as much information as you can? And I also kind of noticed that this kind of occurred to me this last year. You both tell me if you run into this. I almost feel like sometimes menopause becomes like the equivalent of a male midlife crisis.
Oh,
Like,
100%.
right? Like,
Yeah,
women
yeah,
can't
yeah.
do it, but they're going through all of these changes and things. And it seems like at the same time, men are like having a midlife crisis of their own that's not physiological, but they're like changing all of these things and rocking the boat that
I mean,
way.
I think it is somewhat physiological. I
Do
mean,
you
again,
think?
I'm not a doctor, I don't play one on TV, but there is our estrogen's going down, their testosterone's going down, right? So there's this aspect of we are less emotional, they're more emotional. So I do think, I think it's one of those things. It'd probably be great to we could actually have a man talk about this. Uh, I do think men go through menopause. It just doesn't look like
Mm.
us,
Yeah.
but they are going, and because we don't talk about that either,
Yeah.
you know, before we started recording, I said, this I think is going to be a really great topic because I have had women say to me, could you talk about, and we might have touched on this last time, but could you talk about how in my 50s, I really want to have sex and my husband doesn't want to anymore. And
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
I feel crazy because
Yeah.
all these years, my husband was all over me.
Mhm.
I had kids, I was doing this, and I wasn't, and now I'm free. I'm feeling
Mhm.
it again, and they aren't. And now I
Mhm.
feel like I'm crazy, So I
Mhm.
do think I do think men go through it. It's, we don't have a name for it, or there may be a name for it, and I'm just not, I don't know what it is.
Menopause, let's say.
Menopause.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting to see how that actually links by, like, nature nurture, because if their testosterone's going down, maybe that part's physiological, but then it could be the societal messaging that causes them to have an emotional reaction to that. Because
Sure. Yeah.
if they're feeling like their virility or their strength or something is in question now after operating a certain way for the first half of their life, that they
Right.
may be struggling with that emotionally. And that's what causes sometimes this bravado or these changes that they're having, that they
Buying a
feel.
Corvette.
Yeah, exactly. Old chain and a Corvette sports car.
Old trope, but sure.
Oh, but it persists.
Right.
It
I mean,
happens. Yeah.
I know a lot of men in their 50s buying Porsches and doing, the things that they wanted. Yeah. So, and then another thing that's happening is for people that have kids, a lot of times you're in your empty nesting stages. And so that's like an emotionally shifting, yeah, sometimes happy, sometimes really hard, like, stage for people. And, um, that people are then at that point saying, okay, do we still know each other as partners?
mm,
Have we grown apart? How do we reacquaint ourselves? And so that, what I see is people doing in order to get more reacquainted is like travel is a big one. I see a lot of
Mhm.
people being free to travel more together and really finding joy in that. And then finding things that they like doing together. So sometimes this sounds very gendered and like I don't like the way this sounds, but a lot of like if you have a husband who likes to golf and the wife has been like lukewarm about it, but now she finally has time. Like some women are like, I think I'll take some golf lessons and see if we can, instead of him leaving for 4 hours on a Saturday, how do we actually spend time together doing that on the golf course? Or like couples that are doing paint and sip parties, maybe there's one part of the couple that really loves the artistic parts, and how do we do some of these things where we get to do those together, bringing in other aesthetic or sensual parts of us. Or dance, like taking dance classes and lessons and seeing if we can, like, that dance is such a cool thing because there is that physical intimacy with it, and that can be a really fun thing to take on. Just different hobbies, taking a tantra class or going to like a
Mm.
tantra workshop for the weekend or something, like just getting yourselves to a space where you're like, we haven't had time to explore these things together. How do we find some common interests that could bring us together in a way that's different than what we've spent the last couple of decades doing? um any thoughts on that before I go on to something else?
Yeah, I have so many friends who are like not so many, but enough friends of mine that are kind of either retiring or they're at a different stage with work. And this is a conversation a lot around like, what if we want to do different things? What if we want to travel
Mm.
and be in different places? And Brendan and I used to joke and say, and friends agreed, like, should be a renegotiation every 10 years because we're coming up on our 30th anniversary. And we used to joke and say, where you kind of renegotiate the contract because we would never want to get to a place where at the time I used to say this really silly thing, which is not really him, but it's like if you wanted to follow the dead and I wanted to go to Peace Corps or vice versa or
Yeah.
something like that. It was like kind of these silly, but I am seeing couples have those real conversations. What if I want to be out in the desert and you want to be in the mountains? How do we do that? Right. And so obviously there's a lot of economic um, implications there, and that's a really privileged problem to have.
Right.
Um, and like I try to like break through that and think like if you take away the privilege and couples at any age, if they're like starting to feel like they just need some different things, how are they going to stay a couple is the
Mhm.
question. So
Mhm.
I'm not really answering it with an example. I'm just noticing like what you're saying is true, right? Like people are like, well, what if we moved into a compound with our friends? So I could be around, like other women, and you could be around other men, and what if, like, everyone's kind of having these what if conversations.
Right. Well, and hopefully at that point too, if you've been together for a long time, hopefully there's a level of comfort and trust that if you did somebody wants to go to the desert, somebody wants to go to the mountains for a month or 2 months or whatever, that then there is the fun of the absence makes the heart grow fonder, right? And so when you spend more time apart after having lived together every day for decades, that if you do have this month where this person goes off to Antarctica and this person goes to Hawaii, whatever, that you come back together and there's a sense of like, I missed you.
Yeah.
And that can be a really fun thing to add to the relationship if there's like a little bit of separation can really do wonders in that
Yeah.
way.
Mm.
And then the thing I think about also is just that libido is so much more determined by the quality of the sexual connection than it is just by hormones or
Mm.
a lot of people think, well, I'm just this way, this is just the way I'm wired. Yeah, to some degree, but also it's the quality of sex you're having. So I always tell couples, like, if you went to a restaurant last night and what you had was kind of like mediocre, it was like a little bit dry, not super great, kind of like a little expensive for what it was. The ambiance was okay. You wouldn't then today and tomorrow be like, I am dying to go back to that restaurant. Let's do that again, right? Like, so if the sex equality is like kind of mediocre or like a five, you're not going to have a real high libido. You're going to be like, yeah,
Yeah.
good. I'm good for the month. So if you're in this later stage of life and now you have a little bit more time, you have a little bit more bandwidth. Maybe you also have a dry vagina, so you have to use more lubricant. Great. Maybe you have a less strong erection, or maybe that you need a little bit more time in order to get really revved up. That's fine. But how do we work with that and have the quality of sex go to a space where it's like you're taking your time, you're getting each other riled up, you are speaking to their love languages, you're teasing each other, you're setting it up early in the day or early in the week so that there's lots of things whether it's sending them a flirty text or, a scantily clad picture or reading a fun novel together or something where you are playfully like setting this mood up so that that time when you do actually have sex, it's so good that now your libidos both go up because you're like, damn, that was fun. Like, I really love
Yeah.
that. You get to debrief on it that day or the next day, which can be so fun. And then you're setting the tone, for the next time. But that investment in each other and in the quality of sex you're having is so important, I think, as we get older as well.
Mm,
Agree.
agree. Agree. I
And
was just remembering, I'm sharing embarrassing things today. I did once when we were on vacation, like he was at a conference and I was sort of working while we were there. And I sent him, you know, I think PG-13, sort of like a sexy, but accidentally sent it to one of our friends.
No.
that's so funny. Well,
Yeah.
thank goodness it was PG-13.
Yeah. Yeah. It
I
was just enough to be really embarrassing, but not like, something that would ruin a aspiring political career or something.
oh my God.
Oh,
And
there's
I
not
will say, I'm
room
sitting
for
here
an
thinking,
aspiring political career.
yeah. And this whole time I'm thinking there are things I could share, but my son now edits our pod. So
Uh,
I'm like,
Oh yeah.
I'll keep a few things to myself.
keep your stuff under your lid.
Yeah.
Well, and then another thing from those surveys that I kind of put out, one of the things that, and both from my clientele and from the surveys that I put out for this, something that comes up a lot is that people are wanting to feel non-sexual affection and words of affirmation in order to get to the
Mm.
place of wanting sex. And
Mm,
so, I'm guessing these were probably women that filled this out, but I think it's similar for, just for all people, is if you feel like you're wanting your partner to know or you're wanting your partner to be more open to sexuality, then be attentive to them. Be attentive to
hmm
them emotionally. Notice when they look nice or have been trying hard at something, career, house, body, whatever. Notice those and say them, like hold hands, look at each other in the eye, do the John and Julie Gottman thing of a 6-second kiss every day or a 20-second hug. Like, have something that's causing you to bring yourselves towards each other. Because if you're not doing those things and you're just expecting your partner to find you attractive or to want sex or have access to sex, it doesn't happen, so that comes up over and over and over and over again. I hear people say that all the time. Just hold my hand, tell me I look nice, like notice me, be attentive to me, and that goes a really long way. um, and then I think, going to couples therapy just for a tune-up. You don't have to be
mm,
in crisis or in distress. Like, if you've been together for a long time and you're sort of finding that it's a little bit stale, go to couples therapy. Go learn 6 techniques that you could use, do it in 2 sessions and just invest a few $100. And if, again, a privileged thing to say, but if you can, like, go do something where you're really getting some individualized, tailored attention and
mm,
information so that you can build your own repertoire. And there's so many people that still don't even know how to be transparent in relationships in their
yeah.
50s. And I
Mm.
always tell people the difference between honesty and transparency is that honesty is like an answer. If you ask me a question, I can choose to answer you honestly or dishonestly. Transparency is way more work because it means that
Yeah.
I'm vulnerably coming to you and saying, unprompted, hey, I want to tell you something about me. That's a lot harder. And most
Yeah.
people are not raised to be transparent. They don't even understand the difference. And they think, well, I'm always honest. Okay, but if you're honest inside your head and you're not telling me it, then that doesn't do me any good. I need you to come to me and be transparent about your wants, your needs, the things I do that upset you or irritate you, where you feel hurt. So that can be something that in our 50s we can start to learn how to do better as well. And then if you've never done that and you bring that to the relationship, wow, like that's a game changer emotionally as well. And then
I
that,
love, I love, oh, sorry. Did I just cut you off?
yeah, no, I was gonna say it leads to
Finish it.
better physical connection.
Okay. What I love about what you just said is honesty is an answer and transparency is a practice, right? It's just how you show up in a relationship. That's so powerful. I really love that. Thank you. Um, I don't want to skip over especially, what Lisa and I, the stage Lisa and I are at, because I don't know if we fully went there, so we can still get to that. But I do want to talk about, just because there's so many people I know who listen, and friends of mine, who are single in their 50s.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so like this idea of sexual vibrancy really kind of is so important to us, because people who come to our retreats, especially this one coming up, which is plot twist, it's like people had a plot twist in their life,
Mhm.
whether they're making it happen or it happened for them.
Yeah.
How do women who are our age, going through like a whole new like chapter, whether they planned it or
Mhm.
not, tap into that?
Yeah, I love that. That's actually the next thing right in my notes here.
Okay,
And that, I mean, that's
perfect.
absolutely where I find myself, like I'm two
Hmm.
long-term relationships in and now single, and didn't expect that really or plan for it. And now I'm like, whoa, my whole rest of my life again is shifted. And in some ways that's heartbreaking, devastating, and has been incredible grief and loss. And in some ways, it's like, wow, what's ahead? It's kind of exciting, and there's spontaneity and hopefulness. And so I think the biggest thing for people, whether it is, divorce or a breakup or death, being a widow, anything that happens where you're like, oh, wow, I didn't expect to find myself here. I think two things I know are true. And again, I am just very recently into this new, kind of single identity here. And so I don't know for sure. And I'm probably a little more pessimistic because I'm grieving. But I think one thing that's true that people say is that the pool is smaller, right? So
Mm.
it's hard because it's like your pool is smaller and shallower, and that's difficult. But the other thing is that there is absolutely great sex and connection and fun in your 50s and 60s. I have a client, one of my favorite clients, just graduated himself, but I think I talked about him last time too, but he's 67 and having the best sex of his life, and just found a great partner in the last year. And so it's like people that think, oh my gosh, I'm 40 or I'm 50 and I'm never going to find, love again, or I'm never going to have good sex again. No, there's a lot of fun to be had. But I think one of the biggest things is that you get to, at this age, then do some of the work that you may not have done in the relationship that was getting stagnant, or that you felt suffocated in, or that you, I don't know, just it felt like you were in a default. So people that are in this age and they're starting to go, okay, I'm trying to identify myself or redefine myself. There's a lot of like family of origin issues that you could have had. Maybe you've been a pleaser, maybe you've struggled with codependency, um, various things that you have taken on that you can be like, oh, I actually want to go to therapy and figure out how to overcome this. I don't want to attract the same type of people. I'm a
Right.
hyper tuner. I'm super over functioner. I end up enabling people because I hang on way too long. And I don't ever want to do that again. But now I get the
Mm.
Mm.
gift of saying, I'm not going to do that. I'm so much more boundaried already than I ever have been. And you can be more selective, and you get to show up in ways where if you've always sort of said yes, that you're now challenging that and saying like, no, unapologetically, this is what I'm looking for. This is who I am. Oh, sorry, this is what I'm wanting, like you can recreate what it is that you're gearing yourself towards. And then you're going to have a different experience because you're actually pushing yourself to grow into the person you have become, who you want to become, and attract a really different type of partner. So I think there's some really exciting stuff that can happen there. I think for some people, they may go into a space in their 50s where they're like, especially if they just came out of a relationship, they may be like, I don't want to be in a relationship right now. I want to date. I want to date. And I actually got lambasted on this Facebook group called Gen X Singles, because I said that. I'm like, I don't want to be in a relationship right now. I've been in a relationship since I was 17. Like, I have no desire to be in a relationship. And they're like, well, if you don't want to be in a relationship, then why are you dating? You're giving mixed messages. And I'm like, people can date because they want to get to know people. They want to surround themselves by other good humans. They want to challenge themselves. They want to grow. They want to understand themselves better. They want to practice their skills and boundaries and all the things. You don't have to be in a relationship. So there can be people that are like realizing, what is it that I actually need and want in this next phase or stage? And what do I want to accomplish before I get into a relationship? So I just think there's a lot of ways that if we slow down and pause and regroup and take an inventory of what really fits us best, what we really want, what we want to welcome in, what we want to attract, that can be a really fun part of your 50s as well. Does that sort of speak to what you were saying, Carrie, or not?
Yeah, because I think it applies to any woman, whether you're in a long-term relationship or not. Like we get to renegotiate how we show up in the world and how we function in a relationship. And sometimes that's harder when you're staying in the relationship to be like, I don't do that anymore.
Right.
But I think, like you said, like this is an opportunity for you to really go, cool, like this is the cool part of this pain, is that I don't ever have to do that again. And how does that feel in my body, and and how do I go forth attracting what I want? I
Yeah.
actually know someone who's back with someone after a very, very long period apart, and it's great because they get to renegotiate all of that.
Mhm. And I love what you said about that, because I think that could apply to people that have been together for 30 years, or people that are in new relationships, or people that, like you said, like reconnected, is that the best sex I've ever had in my life has been since I have decided that I will only say yes to it when my whole body says yes. And I
Mm.
think myself, as well as I'm guessing both of you and lots of other women, because of the messaging we get, we've had sex so many times when we were a eh, or a maybe, or a yes, but now it's no, but I've started. So now I have to keep saying yes, like all of those things. And so I think that can be one of the coolest things to do, is to be able to say, I'm actually not going to say, I'm not going to proceed with anything with my body unless it's a yes. And being able to say that, whether I've already practiced this with like a new person to date, or whether you said this to the person you've been with for 30 years, to be able to say, I just want you to know that the way I'm going to approach sexuality is that I'm going to listen to my body. And if at any time I start to realize that it's kind of a no, or I need to pause, or I want to slow down, or I don't feel like going that direction, I'm going to tell you in that moment. And that needs to be okay, because that's the only kind of sex I'm going to have. And when you
Mm.
say that before you've even become sexual with somebody, it's like, then they know. And there's
Mm.
not this awkward moment, whether it's your partner of 30 years or a brand new partner, that you're able to say, okay, yeah, like I thought I was a yes for this, but I'm actually not. Like I like what we're doing, but I don't want penetration, or I don't want to do anything more. And that becomes something that can be really liberating. And then as the partner, they know for sure that you're never going to be having sex when they're not desired. So it's
Yeah.
actually a gift to them, because they're like,
That's
oh,
a turn on too.
Yeah. It's like
they
Start to
if
believe
we're
you,
having
like,
sex, it's because I want to. Yeah.
yeah,
yeah.
right.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
it
that
goes back
trust.
to really trusting desire. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, this is so awesome. And I want to like be respectful of your time. And I feel like maybe we're gonna have you back again. Maybe you're just our regular contributor on this topic.
For real.
And we check in with like how it's going on your journey.
Yeah.
But
Ask me tomorrow.
I feel like the spoiler alert on this is always, and it's such a beautiful reminder that you always bring to, is like, like go inward and really, fight for you, like, and really understand you, and be open to that you now isn't exactly like the you then, and that's okay. I think that's beautiful. It really does. It's just everything that we're always repeating in every way, which is when you are really clear on what you love and what you need and what you want, then it's going to be so much easier to call it in and
Mhm.
ask for it and receive it.
Yeah, so
And the
much.
word that keeps coming to me is vulnerability. It
Hmm.
Yeah.
really, across the decades, every single thing that you've shared comes down to there is there's going to be some vulnerability to be able to have um, the best sex, the best intimacy, the best relationship.
Oh,
Vulnerability, transparency, all of that is
Mhm.
it's without it, how do you have good sex and good intimacy, and so then my brain goes to, gosh, so many people have a hard time being vulnerable.
mhm.
I also, one of the things that crossed my mind earlier is, does anybody ever go, this is too much work, I'm not doing any of this? In
Yeah,
which case, then that's not the right person for you, right? But
right.
like, a lot of none of this stuff is easy peasy.
No,
that you've shared?
no. And most of the time, what I find personally, myself and professionally, is that when a partner gets to a place where they're like, what you want me to do requires too much work. I don't
Yeah.
want to do it. And so then,
Mm.
or you're
Mm.
broken, or, you part ways, because it's like, yeah, it is a lot of work to stay in that space of vulnerability and transparency and knowing yourself and digging deep and being honest with yourself so that you can be honest with your partner or transparent with your partner. And I think I want to leave with one like good skill, like a little exercise for people of all ages to do. So
Mm.
there's this thing called Teams. I don't think I spoke about it last time,
Mm-mm.
but Teams is a great way to get to that vulnerability and transparency. So the T, and I don't even know who to give credit for this. I learned it somewhere about 5 years ago, but I use it with so many of my couples. So the T is touch. So if you are both with your partners later and you said, we're going to just touch, holding hands, hugging, whatever. If you're angry at each other, maybe you just touch toes, like whatever it is you can do, but you're touching. And you, in that moment, as you're touching, you just take awareness of the senses, right?
Mm.
Like, what does it feel like? How is their hand warm or cold? Is it soft? Does it feel familiar? Do I want to get closer to them? Do I feel a little too close to them? Like just noticing what that touch feels like. And then the E is educate. So think of something that you learned today and tell your partner, educate them. So the first one, the touch, we have expressed or shared physical, non-sexual intimacy. The educate, we're sharing intellectual intimacy. So maybe you're talking about something you learned on the radio, an article you read, something you learned from interviewing people, whatever, right? So now you have physical and intellectual intimacy being shared. Then the A is appreciation. So you tell them something, like, I really appreciated the way that you handled my mom last night. That relationship's really difficult and you did a really nice job. Or I just
Mm.
so appreciated that you cleaned the bathroom, or whatever it is, like some appreciation. And now you've shared emotional intimacy too. So your physical, intellectual, emotional intimacy always brings that level of safety and trust up, and that kind of wall and defensiveness down. And then the M, I think if you Google it, it stands for metric, but that makes no sense to me. So I always say message. So
Mm.
then when you get to the M, it can be something that you want to share with your partner that you've been a little bit afraid to share. So if it is something like, um, last night when we were talking at dinner, it felt like you were belittling me in front of the kids. Or I felt like when we had friends over that you kind of snapped at me when I was by the barbecue, and that made me feel like, just not very good. Whatever it is, the message can become now the person's closer to you. You've shared all these intimacies and they can access the ability to say, oh, I'm sorry. I did notice that I did that. I should have apologized. I'm really glad you brought that to my attention. I'm really sorry. But if you just walk in and say, last night when you were talking to me in front of the kids, I felt really belittled the way you were saying that
Yeah.
to me, like then they're just going to go, defensive, and there's a fight and it's tension. So doing teams, I call it teams. There's no S, but do teams often, and then it's plural. But that can be a really great way to get to that vulnerability and transparency. And if you practice that every week, if you do a weekly check-in and you do a teams every week, then that can be a really great way, to find that connection. Because what you're looking for is, how do we connect with each other in a way that then
Mm.
brings about that ability to be vulnerable and intimate.
That's great. That's really,
I'm like,
really
yeah,
good.
I'm mind blown. Mind
Yay.
blown. So good. I do
You
feel
both are
like we
so
just
fun.
need to have you back on a regular basis to talk about sex.
All
Well, if
right.
you couldn't tell, I really like to talk, so that won't be a problem
It's
getting me.
so good. And I just think so important.
Oh,
Um, yeah, yeah. Thank you.
thank you for
I'm kind
having
of
me.
wordless, which is not often for me.
That's good.
I really appreciate being here. I feel really passionately about all of these messages, and I'm dying to do TED Talks, and I'm dying to have more public speaking like gigs. I would absolutely love to be able to take this and a million other notes of messages that I have, other places. So I just really appreciate the chance to be here, and it just made my Friday really wonderful to be with both of you.
Well,
Ours too.
I was to say,
Seriously.
back at you for sure. And I think I want to just presence. I want to presence one thing. I wasn't sure if I was going to presence this. This feels very emotional to me. So
Yeah.
I'm just want to say that, like, in case listeners are thinking, God, I'm feeling a little teary.
Mm,
I so many
Mm.
times during this hour or however long we've been talking, I have gotten tears in my eyes. So
Aw.
I will say of happiness when I look at my relationship.
mm,
So I'll own that. But um, I wasn't expecting to feel
Yeah,
emotional about this. But
yeah,
this is, it's so you talk about. I love safety belonging. You didn't use those words, but that's what every human wants.
right.
And so often, to your point earlier, like sex is porn and it's transactional and it's
mm,
expected, and yet ultimately sex is love, safety, belonging.
Yeah.
And so I
mhm.
think that's what's bringing up the emotions for me. It's just the understanding that sex is not just sex, it's holistic.
Absolutely. And I think on the other side of that, that makes me feel for people who are listening and maybe feeling really sad
Yeah,
and unattended to, and maybe questioning their relationship. And I would just say
yeah.
that if you go to, and we could put this in the notes too, but there's an
Hmm.
AASECT. AASECT is AASECT, American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. And that
Oh,
has a website where you can look and see in your area code if there are AASECT-certified sex and relationship therapists. So if you're somebody who's listening and you're feeling like I'm not happy, or I feel trapped, or I feel, just like I'm depressed, whatever it is, like go try to find help, and there's people that will do sliding scale. And, just, I think that's just having resources or a support can be so helpful when you're feeling kind of dismal about your situation, or ask your partner to listen to this with you and
yeah,
pause at the points that spoke to you. Watch the show Couples Therapy, pause that and talk about the things that are applicable to you. So there's ways of reading books, book clubbing a book together. One of my favorite books is Securely Attached.
Mm,
Really, really
I
good.
love that.
Yeah, I should look at that. But anyways, on my website, there's a resources page, like a suggested
nice.
reading, and there's some really, really good books there too. So hopefully that will help
Awesome.
people.
So, last time your song was Escape, and this time your song is your favorite, that song.
Unstoppable, Unstoppable by Sia.
I love
Yeah,
that song.
I know. I
Such a
was,
good
We
song.
actually use that a lot at our retreats
We
you
too.
do,
It's
because
do?
that
amazing.
song
Yeah.
is,
Oh, so good. I love that song anyways, but I was in Australia last year at this time, or I had just gotten back, I guess. And there was this woman at this stand, and she made this beautiful ceramic mug, and it said Unstoppable on it. And she and I had this connection. Like she goes, "Do I know you from somewhere?" And I was like, "No, I'm not from here." We just had this energetic connection. I love energetic connections with people. And I bought this very expensive mug, but I loved what it said, and I have it
yeah,
in my office. And especially right now, going through all of the grief and loss and heartbreak and everything that I've been going through, and therapy, and been, oh God, supported by the most amazing friends. And I listened to that song and I'm like, invincible, unstoppable, and confident is who I am coming out of this as. So that feels like it speaks to me really well. And I love that
oh,
song.
love it.
Oh, good. Yay.
Oh,
Thank
Thank
you so much.
you. I appreciate being here. I hope you both have
yeah,
a wonderful weekend.
Well,
thank
you
you.
you've given us both a lot of gifts,
Yeah.
and to everyone listening, so I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
So everything, all of Monica's links, everything will be in our show notes, and we'll be doing lots of social media around this and tagging her. So, yes, this will not be the last time we speak. I am certain of it.
Yay. All right, you two beautiful women. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and we'll
Thank
chat.
you, you too,
You
and thanks
too.
everyone for listening. We'll be back next week.
So
Yay.
long.
Bye.